Selection Class 47 at Fort Liberty. The Rangers in the class had placed bets on who would make it. Their money was on Sergeant First Class Martinez, 6'2", 220 of solid muscle, perfect PT score, Ranger tab, 2 combat deployments. When he walked into the compound, even the cadre noticed him. He was gone by day 3. Meanwhile, a signals sergeant nobody had paid attention to, a guy who looked like he belonged behind a desk, kept showing up each morning. Average build, quiet, unremarkable in every visible way. He made it through, all 30 days. So what did the selectors see in the signals sergeant that they didn't see in the Ranger? And what did they see in the Ranger that disqualified him so quickly? The answer has nothing to do with strength, nothing to do with speed, nothing to do with combat experience. Delta Force selection is not a physical test. It is a psychological screening disguised as a physical test. And the entire 30-day process is engineered to identify one specific trait that predicts operational success better than any fitness metric ever could. The best Ranger in the Army would fail Delta selection, not because he isn't good enough, because he's the wrong kind of good. Let's break down what that actually means. When people think about Delta selection, they picture the brutal physical events, the 40-mile ruck march, the long drag, sleep deprivation that breaks your ability to think straight. And yes, these events are real. They push candidates to their absolute physical limits. But here's what most people miss entirely. These physical events are not designed to find the most physically fit candidates. They are designed to create conditions where psychological traits become visible. The physical stress is the instrument. The psychological response is what's actually being measured. Think about it this way. Any reasonably fit Special Forces soldier can complete a 40-mile ruck. The question isn't whether you can finish. The question is how you behave while finishing. What decisions do you make when you're exhausted? How do you respond when nothing makes sense? What happens to your personality when every cognitive filter is stripped away? The cadre aren't impressed by the guy who finishes first. They're watching the guy who finishes first and then immediately looks around for validation. They're watching the guy who asks how he did. They're watching the guy who needs to know his time. That need to know is the tell, and it's exactly what disqualified Sergeant Martinez. The psychological trait that Delta selection screens for has a clinical name: tolerance of ambiguity. In simple terms, it's the ability to function effectively when information is incomplete, when objectives are unclear, and when conditions are constantly unpredictable. Most people need certainty to perform well. They need to know the rules, the timeline, the expectations, and most importantly, where they stand. Give them structure and they thrive. Remove that structure and their performance collapses. Delta operators work in environments where certainty doesn't exist. Hostage rescue with incomplete intelligence, running human sources where deception is constant, operating alone in hostile territory with no backup and no extraction plan. In these conditions, the need for certainty is a liability. It creates hesitation. It causes second-guessing. It makes you ask questions when you should be acting. So how does selection test for this trait? By engineering 30 days of deliberate psychological ambiguity. Candidates are never told the time standard for any event. You finish the 40-mile ruck, and nobody tells you whether your time was good or bad. You complete the land navigation course, and there's no feedback. Pass or fail, fast or slow, you get the same blank stare from the cadre. You're never told if you're advancing to the next phase. You're never told how many candidates are left. You're never told what comes tomorrow. The silence of the cadre is not cruelty. It is the test. Every moment of that silence, every unanswered question, every piece of missing information is measuring one thing. Can you perform without knowing where you stand? Candidates who need feedback, who need validation, who need structure to feel confident, those candidates start to crack. Not physically, psychologically. They start performing for the cadre instead of just performing. They start looking for signals, reading into every glance, trying to decode meaning from silence. That behavior tells the selectors everything they need to know. Now, you might think the psychological screening starts on day 1 of the physical phases. You'd be wrong. It starts weeks earlier. Before any candidate touches a rucksack, they sit through hours of psychological evaluation. The Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, or MMPI, is one of the most comprehensive psychological assessments ever developed. 567 questions, designed to map the full landscape of someone's personality. Delta's psychologists aren't looking for superheroes. They're screening for specific traits: emotional stability under pressure, comfort with extended isolation, the ability to make independent decisions without external approval, and critically, a low need for external validation. Candidates who score high on need for approval get flagged. Candidates who need structure get flagged. Candidates who need recognition get flagged. The ranger who everyone expected to succeed, his psychological profile probably showed a high need for achievement combined with a high need for recognition. In conventional military units, that's the perfect combination. It creates soldiers who push hard and want to be noticed for it. In Delta, it's a disqualifier. Operators who need recognition are operational security risks. They talk when they should be silent, they stand out when they should blend in. They make the mission about themselves when it should be about the objective. The signals sergeant who nobody noticed? His profile probably showed high emotional stability, comfort with ambiguity, and a low need for external validation. He didn't need to be seen. He didn't need to prove anything. He just did the work. Every phase of selection tests tolerance of ambiguity in a different context. Land navigation puts you alone in the Appalachian wilderness with a map, a compass, and coordinates. No set time, no feedback. Can you make decisions by yourself, in isolation, without anyone telling you if you're doing it right? The long drag strips away your cognitive defenses through physical exhaustion. When your body is broken down, your true psychological baseline becomes visible. Some guys get angry. Some guys get desperate. Some guys just keep moving without any visible emotional shift. That last response is what selectors look for. Team exercises reveal how you handle ambiguous social dynamics. Who steps up to lead? Who insists on leading? Who adapts fluidly when leadership shifts? The guy who always needs to be in charge is flagged as quickly as the guy who falls apart without structure. The stress interviews might be the purest test. Candidates face questions with no right answers, scenarios that shift mid-response, contradictions designed to unsettle. The question isn't whether you give the correct answer. There is no correct answer. The question is whether you can sit in that uncertainty without losing your composure. If you're finding this breakdown valuable, take a second to subscribe. We go deep on special operations every week, breaking down the psychology, tactics, and realities that most content completely misses. Delta selectors have a term for their ideal candidate. They call him the gray man. The gray man is unremarkable by design. Average build, quiet demeanor, nothing that draws attention. You could pass him on the street and forget him instantly. You could share a flight with him and never remember his face. This isn't an accident. This is the operational requirement. Delta operators work in environments where visibility equals death. They run sources in denied territories. They conduct surveillance in hostile cities. They execute missions where the slightest deviation from normal draws lethal attention. The alpha male personality that dominates conventional military units is a catastrophic liability in these environments. The guy who walks into a room and commands attention through physical presence alone, that guy cannot disappear into a crowd in Damascus. That guy cannot blend in at a cafe in Tehran. That guy cannot work a source network where trust depends on appearing completely ordinary. The gray man concept explains why the most physically impressive candidates often fail. Their physique itself is a disadvantage. Their presence is too memorable. Even if they have the psychological traits, their body makes operational invisibility impossible. The signals sergeant's average build wasn't a limitation, it was an asset. Former Delta operators described the unit's personality composition as surprisingly introverted, not universally, but disproportionately. The guys who talk too much get filtered out. The guys who seek attention get filtered out. The guys who need to be recognized for their achievements get filtered out. What remains is a concentration of quiet professionals. People who are comfortable in extended isolation. People who observe without needing to participate. People who can sit in silence without feeling compelled to fill it. The personality profiles overlap heavily with INTJ and INTP types. Strategic thinkers who operate independently. Analysts who trust their own judgment. Individuals who find social dynamics draining rather than energizing. This doesn't mean every Delta operator is an introvert, but it means the selection process systematically favors introverted traits. The qualities that make someone the life of the party are the same qualities that get you killed in denied area operations. So, why does tolerance of ambiguity matter more than physical fitness, more than tactical skill, more than combat experience? Because every other quality can be trained. Delta has the resources to build any physical capability. They can teach advanced marksmanship. They can develop tactical expertise. They have time, money, and the world's best instructors. What they cannot train is psychological architecture. A person's fundamental relationship with uncertainty is established long before they reach Fort Liberty. Either you can function in ambiguity, or you can't. And no amount of training changes that baseline. The missions Delta executes require operators who can make life-or-death decisions with incomplete information. Operators who can function when every assumption might be wrong. Operators who can remain effective when certainty is impossible. Physical fitness gets you to the starting line. Tolerance of ambiguity determines whether you can do the job. Sergeant Martinez probably went on to have an exceptional military career. Ranger Regiment, maybe even another Special Operations Unit. In any environment with clear standards and defined feedback, he likely execules. But Delta doesn't operate in those environments. They operate in the gray space where rules don't exist, where feedback never comes, and where the only certainty is uncertainty itself. The signals sergeant understood something Martinez didn't. In Delta, the person you'd never notice is exactly the person they're looking for. The gray man who can sit in silence without needing answers, who can perform without validation, who can function in ambiguity. That's not a limitation. That's the mission requirement.